Well, hello. Welcome back to my channel. Just Shauna here to talk about a friggin' book. So, no suspense, no drama. You see it in the title. I am talking about City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert, and I'm not gonna hold it up the entire time because it's an individual book review. You know what fucking book I'm talking about. Also, it's very reflective and heavy. But I would like to just show some appreciation for this cover. Pink is my favorite color, and so obviously this is just beautiful to me. And I will absolutely be purchasing this book because, oh my God, I loved it so much. I buddy read this with Donna over at Donna Tsundoku, and her channel name originally was Basic Book Babe, but she recently changed it. And Tsundoku, by the way, is the most fun word ever. It apparently means if I remember correctly from her saying, it's a Japanese word for someone who like buys books and then doesn't read them, if I remember correctly. It's something like that. And I was like, that is too fun. And definitely shout out to Donna because she is just a fucking delight. And we had such a good time buddy reading this. Oh my God, the girl cracks me up. She's so fucking funny. If you have not checked her out, please go do so because she's just like a ball of fun. So City of Girls is, as I mentioned, historical fiction. It's adult and it is reminiscent of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, simply for the fact that it is an older woman telling her life story or part of her life story to a younger woman. And she grew up in like the 1940s in Manhattan. Well, she didn't grow up in Manhattan, but the majority of the story takes place when she's around 19, 20 years old in the 1940s in Manhattan. And she is working in a playhouse, like a theater, but like a very rundown theater. And for me, that's pretty much where the similarities end. And I really didn't want to mention that too much. I don't want to talk about it too much, like the similarities, because for me personally, this book stands fully on its own. But I just wanted to mention it because I've heard other people say that, and I don't want anyone to think that it's like just a copycat of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because it's not. And the writing style, the authorial voice is very different, the imagery and everything. And for me personally, I much preferred City of Girls to The Seven Husbands. But again, I don't want to go all into that, but just for anyone who had heard that as well and who might think that like, oh, it's just a copycat of that, it is not. So Vivian Morris is a very sheltered, well-to-do girl. She comes from a WASP family. Her family has money. They're part of, you know, the aristocracy. And she just is kind of flailing through life. She drops out of college because she doesn't really have a direction in life. And she gets sent to her Aunt Peg in Manhattan to basically like kick it with her when she is 19 years old. And there are just so many amazing characters in this book. And there's Aunt Peg, who runs this playhouse, and Aunt Peg is just a tornado of a human, and she also comes from money. So Vivian's father and Aunt Peg were brother and sister, but Peg went off on her own to live this bohemian lifestyle, kind of shunning the family like traditions and whatnot. And then there are various characters at the theater, at the playhouse, who are just, oh my God, to die for. There is Celia. There's Mr. Herbert, who's like the playwright. And oh my God, he's hilarious. So Vivian gets in the habit when she's staying there to say good morning to him every morning, even though, and it becomes like a game because he's just so cynical and like depressive and just like doomsday all the time. So she would say, "Good morning, Mr. Herbert. The point is debatable," he might respond. Or on another day, "Good morning, Mr. Herbert. I will half allow it." Or, "Good morning, Mr. Herbert. I fail to see your argument." And just so on and so forth. And like, it's just so funny to me. It's so funny. Lily, stop it. Will you fucking relax? Full of piss and vinegar. When I tell you I was laughing out loud, you guys, I was legit cackling at some points in this book. Like, oh my God, the writing is, oh, it's so good. It's so funny. At least to me, it's like right up my alley. Crap like this. Peg is talking about their shows that they put on. Nothing happened per se, said Peg. It's just a lackluster show, but it's nothing to lose sleep over. It's always been lackluster. Nobody in the audience seemed unduly harmed by it. They all left the theater with the use of their legs. Like, what? And then Vivian talking about her mother. We didn't have the closest relationship, even under the best of circumstances. She was a keen horsewoman, and given that I was neither a horse nor fascinated by horses, we'd never had much to talk about. Here's another, I'm not going to read all of them, but like, there's just, it's so funny. Vivian talking about some man that she was like kissing or something. He and I had been talking about jazz, which is to say that he had been talking about jazz, and I had been listening to him talk about jazz, because that is how you talk to a man about jazz. I'll stop, but like, oh my God, so many times. There's a scene where a character is talking about their experience of losing their virginity, and I almost had tears in my eyes. I was laughing so fucking hard. And Donna described it really well, that this book kind of has, there's like the beginning part that's kind of more lighthearted and fun and silly, and then there is kind of an inciting incident, and the middle part gets pretty serious, and then the war happens, and she's describing what it was like to be in New York City at that time. It was just a little more somber and serious. Still had its funny moments, of course, but just the tone was a little different. And then the ending was much more touching and sweet, and very much felt like the cool down, you know what I mean? And through the entire thing, so the premise, like I said, is an older woman telling her life story to a younger woman. This isn't a spoiler, but the kind of prologue part of this book is Vivian receiving a letter from a woman named Angela, who is asking her, who were you to my father? And Vivian is saying, well, I can't really speak for him, but let me tell you what he was to me. So then throughout this whole thing, it's Vivian, she'll refer to Angela. She'll be like, well, like I said, Angela. So through the whole thing, you're reminded of this. But for a while, I forgot. And then it popped up, and I was like, oh, fuck. That's right. Who's Angela's dad? You don't know who Angela's dad is through the entire book up until like towards the end. And like, even though nothing is really happening, it's just her kind of talking about her life and how she was living her life. The beginning part, like I said, it's more silly and fun and whatever. And then there's like an inciting incident, and it's a little bit of like drama going on. But then kind of the last 50% of the book is not a lot really happening. Some things happen, but there's not really high drama, but your interest is still kept up because you're like, who the fuck is Angela's dad? When is he gonna come into play? Like, who was he? And there were quite a few times in this book where, you know, it's told about the 1940s. There were some problematic, you know, things, problematic views people had. The misogyny, sexism, racism, of course, classism, all these things were kind of touched on. Toxic masculinity was even touched on, but without being like, we're going to talk about toxic masculinity now. So I really appreciated how it was done, where now Vivian is older, she's lived through all these decades, and she is she's very aware of like the times that she's telling the story about. Ooh, and this was what I was talking about, where like classism is kind of talked about, again, without being like, I'm gonna talk about classism now. Vivian is talking to her brother, who he's like the good child, and she's kind of like the black sheep. And he's talking about when he went to Delaware, and he spent a few weeks in Delaware. And he says, some of the people I spent time with in Delaware were pretty rough, he said. But you know how that is. Sometimes you want to rub elbows with people who weren't raised the same way as you. Expand your horizons. Maybe it builds character. And Vivian says, well, that was pretentious. And then, encouragingly though, he smiled. I smiled too. I tried to look like someone who was busy expanding her horizons and building her character through intentional fraternization with her social inferiors. A difficult look to master in a single facial expression, but I did my best. Like the sarcasm. And then she says, anyway, at some point in a woman's life, she just gets tired of being ashamed all the time. After that, she is free to become whoever she truly is. And I fucking love that sentiment so much. And there is a conversation, without going too much into it because I don't want to spoil again, but there's a conversation between two characters where there's this man who has been through some shit, and he's just talking about that he feels like a coward because he's not the same as so many other men where, you know, people want to just like charge into battle or they're not afraid of anything. And he's talking about how like he is afraid of shit and that it makes him feel like he's a failure of a man or less of a man. And while I was reading it, I was like, who cares? And then Vivian literally says to this person, she says, so what if you are? So what? That doesn't make you less of a man. That doesn't make you a failure. Like, I think you're a wonderful person for XYZ reasons. And so what? Maybe you're more afraid of things. But like, that doesn't mean anything about you as a man, you know? And I just loved that whole conversation because, you know, I could go on, I could go into it. But that's part of like, for me personally, that's part of like being a feminist is you don't want men to feel that way. You don't want these like really rigid stereotypes on anyone, including men. And they shouldn't have to feel like, oh, I'm less of a man if I don't fit XYZ stereotype about men, if I'm too soft, if I'm too this or whatever. Like, that's such bullshit. And it sucks that some men feel that way, that a lot of men feel that way. And it shouldn't be. And that's part of toxic masculinity. That's part of what within our culture, you know what I mean? Like this systemic toxic masculinity that's ingrained in our culture. People of all genders should be able to just be who the fuck they are without feeling like less of a whatever because they don't fit the stereotype, you know? And I just appreciated how it was handled in this conversation, in this book. I will await the fucking tirade novel-length comment that I'm sure is gonna come about toxic masculinity isn't real from somebody. I look forward to it. So, needless to say, I fucking loved this book. I think everybody should read this book. It's, if you like historical fiction, of course. Definitely if you liked fucking Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and books like that, fucking read this book. Oh my God. And especially like the little blurbs that I read, that's like not even half of the just great moments, the funny as fuck moments. I don't want to read anything from the part that I mentioned where a character is losing their virginity, but it's a fucking riot. On my 1 to 10, I gave this a 9.5, which translates to 5 pushinicorns. Yay, another one that's only like the 5th one of the year. If you have read this, please let me know down below in the comments what you thought of it. If you do read it anytime soon and you come back to this video, let me know what you think of it. I hope that if you do read it, that you love it as much as I did, or at least like close to as much as I did. I don't understand why more people aren't talking about this book. As always, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.